Revealed. 7 incredible changes your body undergoes at 70. The touching truth. Nobody tells you. Margaret's hands trembled as she kneaded the dough, the soft flour sifting through her fingers like time slipping away. At 70, every movement echoed the burdens of age, and she felt the subtle ache deep within her back. Discomfort hadn't always been her companion. Just weeks ago, a health scare had turned her world upside down. No longer just a grandmother with a penchant for baking, she now faced the stark reality of her fragility. A shiver of doubt coursed through her. Could she still be the matriarch her family depended on? As she kneaded, memories danced in her mind, laughter shared over Sunday dinners, and the contagious energy each child brought into her home. Yet, that joy rooted deep in family values felt overshadowed by an unsettling fear now lurking within the walls of her cozy kitchen. Her children had noticed her waning strength, caught glimpses of the anxiety etched on her face, and they worried. It gnawed at her, knowing their concern stemmed from a painful truth she scrambled to suppress. "I'm fine," she assured them, bracing herself against the growing unease. Deep down, the possibility of her independence eroding taunted her like a shadow that wouldn't leave. During a routine visit to the doctor, the young physician attempted to reassure her, detailing the physical changes her body was undergoing. His stories of resilience tugged at her heart. Yet, when he shared his own amusing struggles with aging, Margaret felt a spark light in her chest. Laughter bubbled forth, infectious in its brightness, momentarily dissolving the veil of fear. Still, the stark contrast between the strong woman she used to be and the frail figure she now faced in the mirror was jarring. Each grimace felt magnified, revealing insecurities she had never confronted, the sagging skin, the trembling hands, and the rapid-fire thoughts that reminded her of the years ticking away. Back at home, a surprise birthday party unfolded, vibrant and loud, yet heavy with underlying anxieties. Her children filled the space, voices overlapping in a blend of joy and trepidation. Conversational fodder shifted from trivial jokes about age to deeper confessions regarding identity and their roles in life. Alex, ever collected yet holding himself back, struggled with discontent, and Sarah fretfully maneuvered through her commitments. David, the youngest, hovered like a lost bird, uncertain of where he would land. In that room, love radiated, yet it intertwined with an unspoken tension that clung to the air. Margaret realized with a palpable sense of clarity that her children were dealing with their perceptions of aging, mirroring her own journey. It was tearing at her heart. Could discussing fears be the key to their healing? The idea of erasing the stigma of aging became an alluring thought, a chance to redefine vitality beyond mere physicality. But just as she gathered her thoughts, a loud crash shattered the moment. A picture frame fell from the wall, a reminder of fragility hanging in the balance. Silence enveloped the room as they stared at the shattered glass, each piece reflecting an unexpressed fear of losing what they cherished most. What would the future hold for them all, tangled in the delicate web of love mixed with the specter of loss? Each heart trembled as the weight of their truths loomed large, teasing the question of how they would navigate this treacherous path together. Margaret's breath quickened as she stepped back from the table, the remnants of the cake she had been preparing lying in splattered chaos around her. She could almost hear the fragments of laughter from her children mingling with the silent acknowledgement of their collective fear. The party had turned somber too quickly. Instead of being a celebration of life, it felt more like a prelude to a gathering of farewells. What had once been a comforting kitchen, filled with warmth and nostalgia, now felt like a cage of uncertainty. She took a moment to steady herself, brushing flour from her trembling hands and concentrating on the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. It was time for action, not retreat. Margaret recalled her doctor's voice, so calm as he spoke about growth and change, about how each stage of life brought new challenges but also new insights. She could feel the remnants of laughter bubbling beneath the surface. It just needed coaxing into the light. What if she could do something with this fear, instead of letting it consume her? With newfound determination coursing through her, she grabbed her phone and texted her children, suggesting they sit down together at the table tomorrow morning for breakfast. "Let's make it just us, no distractions," she promised herself, a whisper of resolve. She craved honest conversations, an opportunity to dismantle the facade that had surrounded their feelings. Later that evening, the kitchen was illuminated by the golden glow of a single lamp. Margaret carefully wiped the flour off the table. Each touch was deliberate, as if she were caressing the memories embedded in the wood. The idea of the breakfast was more than just food. It was a bridge. That night, sleep evaded her, thoughts racing with the possibilities of what the next day could unfold. Her mind danced between fear and hope, questioning and affirming the path she would pave. Her children had provided strength in their love, yet she had never thought about how deeply their worries about her impacted their own lives. In the early morning light, Margaret emerged from her room with purpose. She began preparing the breakfast that had become a ritual over the years, a spread of pancakes and fresh fruit. But this time, it held greater significance. She found herself pouring not just batter, but belief into each pancake, envisioning it as food for conversation. As the aroma of breakfast wafted through the house, she felt an electric pulse of courage building within her. This was an invitation for all their emotions to land on the table, a call to unpack everything that had been unspoken for far too long. When her children arrived, bleary-eyed but curious, the atmosphere felt thick with anticipation. Margaret offered everyone a plate, her heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of their chatter, and then she dove into her agenda. "I want to talk," she said carefully, her voice steady yet vulnerable, "about aging, about fear, and about how we can be brave together." The silence that followed was both terrifying and liberating. Would they resist, tangle in their own hesitations, or would they allow this to be the beginning of a new chapter, one that embraced their shifting lives? Margaret's heart raced at the gathering shadows of their collective anxieties. But beneath the surface was an undeniable resolve, and the tantalizing promise that maybe, just maybe, confronting their fears could turn the tide. As the first words of vulnerability began to unfurl around the table, Margaret couldn't help but wonder if this conversation would crack open the door to a startling revelation, one that might even lead her to discover a talent she never knew she had. What lay hidden beneath those layers of fear and familial ties? The very thought sent shivers of anticipation down her spine. This journey was just beginning. Margaret watched her children's faces as her words settled into the air, hoping to catch a glimpse of the emotional undercurrents swirling beneath their expressions. The awkward silence lingered, thick and palpable. It was a stark shift from the usual easy banter they shared over pancakes. As she sat there, she realized the moment was heavy with potential. The promise of raw honesty could weigh far more than a typical family conversation. Her eldest, Alex, was the first to break the silence. "Mom, are you okay? This sounds serious." The genuine concern registered in his voice, yet it also carried the weight of unspoken fears. Margaret nodded, her voice barely wavering as she replied, "I want to be okay, and that means being open with you. We're all facing changes, aren't we?" This struck a chord with her youngest, Lily, who had been quietly pushing her fruit around on her plate, a furrow creasing her brow. "What kind of changes? Are you sick?" The tremor in Lily's voice revealed a deeper anxiety that Margaret hadn't fully acknowledged, that perhaps her children's fears were rooted not just in her aging, but in their own uncertainties about life and the world beyond their kitchen. "No, sweetheart," Margaret reassured, though a tightness clenched in her chest. "It's not about sickness. It's about growing up. We all face changes, how we view ourselves, how we view each other, and the experiences that come with those changes." As she spoke, she felt a lightening, like shedding an old skin. Building momentum, she added, "I realized that while I've been afraid of the things changing, I haven't talked about them. And maybe that's been holding us back from really connecting. I'd love to hear what you feel." The invitation hung in the air, a moment of uncharted territory. She glanced at Alex, who was fidgeting with his fork, doubts flashing in his eyes. Was he grappling with his own fears, or contemplating how vulnerable he could allow himself to be in this moment? "I guess I didn't think about all of that," he finally said, his voice softer. I know things can change fast. I don't want you to be alone." His words struck a chord in Margaret. They pierced through their shared grief, illuminating the hope sitting quietly beneath. "You're right," she affirmed. "We need to lean on each other through these changes." Encouraged by this shift, Margaret took a bold step. What if we shared our thoughts on what we're most afraid of? It can't just be me. The moment stretched as everyone processed her challenge. Lily's expression grew determined. "I'm scared about college. What if I don't make friends?" It was a raw and honest admission, echoing Margaret's own fears that had been simmering just below the surface. As they delved deeper, sharing vulnerabilities, a connection sparked within the room that felt almost magical. Margaret felt a palpable shift, not just in her children, but within herself. This was a release, a shared burden that lightened their hearts even slightly as they exchanged their fears, aspirations, and thoughts on life's unpredictable journey. But amid the vulnerability, a troubling thought knotted in her gut. Would this connection unravel as easily as it had formed? The prospect of confronting age and mortality was daunting. Could they truly continue to face it together? With an electric tension now crackling, Margaret knew that while they had taken a monumental step forward, the path ahead was rugged and uncertain. It presented an opportunity for growth and rediscovery, but also hinted that deeper fears loomed on the horizon. That day, sitting together at their breakfast table became a pivot point in her journey of understanding, not only her life, but also the power of connection. What had started as an attempt to bridge the chasm of fear began to blossom into a dialogue that would reveal far more than she had anticipated. The anticipation was palpable. As they wrapped up their breakfast, Margaret felt the stirring of newfound talent within her, the ability to lead these conversations, to facilitate change not just in herself, but in them too. The real question was emerging. How would she nurture this new aspect of herself, and what other revelations lay just outside the reach of their current understanding? Margaret inhaled, ready for the next phase, because one thing was undeniable. They had opened Pandora's box, and whatever was inside awaited exploration. What other truths would this newfound dialogue awaken? Margaret poured herself another cup of coffee, the familiar warmth grounding her in this new reality they had begun to shape together. It was a small comfort, yet something about the routine felt different now, loaded with potential. As she stared at the swirling black liquid, her mind oscillated between anticipation and dread, wondering how their conversations would evolve. The breakfast table had transformed from a mere meal space to a crucible for change. She noticed Alex tapping his foot nervously, an unconscious testament to his internal wrestling. The weight of their recent discussion was evident. Margaret realized she had unearthed a reservoir of feelings within her children. But could she navigate the consequences of their shared vulnerabilities? Each heartbeat echoed her resolve, urging her to dive deeper into these dialogues. Her thoughts spiraled back to her initial fears of aging. It was a pervasive worry, unavoidable since her own mother had succumbed to her health issues, a specter hovering in the back of her mind. Yet having shared this fear, might it transform into something livable rather than paralyzing? Margaret contemplated how she could shift the narrative, turning age from a burden into a natural progression of life. "Mom, when you said we all face changes..." Alex's voice, tentative yet gaining strength, pulled her from her reverie. "What kinds of changes have you thought about?" Despite the knot tightening in her stomach, Margaret was resolute. It was her turn to share, not merely to reflect on age, but to consider what change meant for her personally. "I've been thinking a lot about my purpose. As you both grow and navigate your lives, I find myself asking what my own journey looks like." A silence fell, heavy yet filled with promise. She took a steadying breath, watching her children digest her words. This was the depth she had been hesitant to explore, yet it felt cathartic. "Do you feel lost?" Lily's gentle inquiry cut through the tension, her innocence both piercing and profound. Margaret swallowed hard. There was a significant difference between feeling lost and being lost. "I think it's more about needing to redefine my identity. Once, being your mother was my primary vocation. Now, with you both on the cusp of exploring your own lives, I have to find what fulfills me beyond that role." The determination in Margaret's voice faltered slightly, as cracks in the facade of her courage began to show. Yet within those cracks, a sense of liberation unfurled. "Maybe we could help each other," Alex ventured. "I've heard of people taking on new challenges as they shift into new phases of life, like learning a new skill or even volunteering more." Margaret felt a rush of warmth at his suggestion. It was a tangible step toward bridging the divide they had faced. What a brilliant way to cultivate resilience. As their conversation unfurled, the ideas began to flow between them, like a fire igniting shared ambition. They bounced suggestions off one another, the air crackling with energy. It was not just a discussion, but a collaborative plan on how they could weather life's storms together. However, her heart stumbled as another haunting realization emerged. What if stepping into this new phase brought her happiness, but it potentially distanced her from her children as they grew independent? Margaret forced herself to swallow that thought down. They were building something new, and the fear of loss was par for the course. They had opened the door to honest dialogue, but was she ready to face the reality that change looked different for each of them? As they wrapped up their discussion, Margaret could feel the distinct shift within her. She was no longer the passive participant in her own life, but a deliberate architect of her future. The fear of loneliness connected to her old self was dissolving. Perhaps she could be both a mother and a woman seeking her own place in the world. Yet, as the coffee cooled beside her, a new uncertainty bubbled to the surface. How could she be proactive in her personal growth without undermining her role as a supportive mother? The balance felt precarious, like walking on a tightrope. Margaret took a deep breath, understanding that this struggle was just beginning. Her journey was no longer just about survival, but about thriving amid the unpredictable maze of life. With determination ignited under her skin, she recognized the potential for personal discovery. The day held its promise of revelations and challenges. In this fluid transformation, she realized that acceptance must be paramount. But as she ventured forth, a nagging thought lingered. Who would be the first to test the boundaries of this new dynamic? Would her children, buoyed by newfound confidence, truly embrace her developmental journey? Margaret stood at the precipice, aware that what lay ahead was anything but predictable. What awaited her beyond her comfort zone? As the sun drifted higher in the sky, casting a soft light over her kitchen, Margaret felt an unusual energy threading through her veins. Today, she resolved, would be the day she ventured beyond the confines of her usual routine. The lingering apprehension had begun to wane, replaced by a tingling enthusiasm. She considered the conversations she had initiated with Alex and Lily. They had dismantled a barrier forged by years of silence. Perhaps this clarity could formulate into actionable goals. With a flicker of intention, she opened her laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating her face with a blue hue that wrestled with the sunlight. She was no longer just a mother. She was a seeker of knowledge, a woman on the brink of rediscovery. What would it be like to pursue something she was passionate about purely for herself? The thought danced tantalizingly in her mind. She took a moment to consider what that could be. Art? Writing? The fleeting moments of inspiration she had stifled over the years began to bubble up. Once, she had dreamt of immersing herself in the literary world, but what had stopped her? The constraints of familial duty? Lack of confidence? Juggling commitments had pushed her own aspirations to the background. No more. Her thoughts quickened. It was time to chart a new course. Fingers flying across the keyboard, Margaret searched for local classes, the kind that could ignite the flickering embers of her old dreams. A creative writing workshop caught her eye. "Find Your Voice," it read. The title alone sent a jolt of excitement through her. The thought of expressing herself, of sharing not only her story, but also listening to others, ignited a fire within. Yet as she clicked the link, trepidation crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the other participants, their raw experiences and unfiltered creativity, left her feeling small? Questions churned in her mind. The balance between her budding independence and her role as a mother loomed ominously. Would pursuing her passion inadvertently take time away from her children? Margaret paused, the cursor blinking, a persistent reminder of her indecision. In that moment of uncertainty, she found herself reflecting on the earlier breakfast conversation. Alex had offered encouragement, the idea of shared challenges. Could this not be her challenge too? It suddenly struck her that personal development didn't have to exist in isolation. By stepping into her own light, she wouldn't overshadow her children. Instead, they could shine brighter together. Taking a deep breath, she made her decision. Margaret enrolled in the course, feeling a surge of spontaneity that brought with it a sense of liberation. This small action, one seemingly inconsequential decision, felt monumental. She was committing to herself, to a part of her that had yearned for expression. Later that afternoon, buoyed by her decision, she suggested to Alex and Lily that they should take turns discussing their own aspirations over dinner. Her children appeared intrigued, with Alex suggesting they incorporate goal-setting into a weekly routine. The manner in which their eyes lit up with the idea ignited another layer of excitement within her. As they sat down to dinner later that night, Margaret brimmed with anticipation, eager to share her journey, but also ready to invite them into a new familial dynamic, a dance of aspirations, support, and mutual growth. Yet as laughter and ideas rippled through the air, a nagging sensation pricked at the back of her mind. Changes were underway, but how far could this collaboration stretch? Could this environment sustain potentially overwhelming revelations? The quiet fear that surfaced reminded her that excitement was often shadowed by uncertainty. Margaret recognized the challenge ahead. Navigating this newfound space required delicate balance and discernment. She clenched her fork, pondering whether her pursuit would lead them to a deeper connection or create uncharted distances. The hunger for growth battled with the fear of alienation, and the stakes felt intricately personal. And so, as the conversation flowed around her, Margaret concluded that transparency would be vital in this endeavor. She couldn't soar without allowing her children to understand the complexities she faced. The very fabric of their relationship would be woven together through these changes if handled with care. But as her heart raced with the thrill of possibilities, a single thought crashed through the fog of enthusiasm. How would they react if she truly laid bare her fears and failures? The moment of truth beckoned, and she was standing on the cusp with no clear resolution in sight. Margaret glanced at her children, the impulse for honesty bursting within her. The time had come to face the revelations that could ignite their shared potential or fracture what they'd just begun to build. Margaret's gaze lingered on Alex and Lily. Their faces held curiosity, a palpable eagerness that both comforted and terrified her. She could feel the weight of her thoughts pressing on her chest, her own fears pooling into an overwhelming tide. Taking a sip of her water, she steadied herself. She was on the brink of a revelation that could either bring them closer or unravel the bond they were building through shared aspirations. "I have something I want to share," she began, her voice slightly trembling. Alex and Lily paused, their forks mid-air. She could see the flicker of concern and anticipation in their eyes. "It's about my writing class." As she spoke, Margaret felt a mix of vulnerability and empowerment. "I realized that stepping back into writing is both exciting and terrifying for me. I've held back from pursuing my passion for years, thinking I wouldn't be good enough or that it might take time away from you. Both children exchanged glances, their expressions shifting as they processed her admission. "But I think that it's important for you to know that I want to grow too," she continued. "I want to show you that it's okay to chase after your dreams, even if it feels scary." The words poured out, each one liberating a part of her that had been dormant for so long. Alex nodded slowly, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Mom," he said, "I get it. I mean, I've been scared about starting my own podcast because what if people don't like it? But you never held back from encouraging me to dive into it. Why should it be any different for you?" Lily joined in, her voice tentative yet determined. "I was going to say the same thing. If you're scared, that means something important is happening, just like with the soccer tryouts. I was scared, but then I realized it was just another chance to learn." Margaret's heart swelled as she absorbed their words. They were not just reflecting her fears, but also her hopes, intertwined with learning. The conversation had taken a profound turn. Instead of distancing themselves, her children were stepping up, expressing their own vulnerabilities in response to hers. This newfound openness illuminated her path, confirming that her pursuit of passion could indeed enhance their bond rather than threaten it. Yet, a lingering doubt loomed. Was she truly ready to inspire them when she often felt like a beginner herself? The image of her vulnerability unfolded like a tapestry, revealing frayed edges where she had hidden parts of herself for too long. Her stomach knotted as she contemplated the layers of honesty still left unaddressed. "But what happens when I fail? What will you think if my writing, if I am not as good as I hope?" The question hung in the air like an unplayed note, an unresolved chord. The room fell silent, and for a moment, uncertainty mingled with the warmth of their earlier discussion. Would they see her failures as disappointment, or could they view struggles as part of growth? In seeking to illuminate her journey, had she inadvertently opened the door to their fears of mediocrity? "Mom," Alex finally said, breaking the silence, "we don't expect you to be perfect. None of us are. We get to explore the messiness of it together." His words anchored Margaret, providing the reassurance she didn't know she needed. Perhaps leaning into this murky terrain, embracing her fears, in their collective journey of self-discovery, was just what they needed to deepen their connection. Margaret could practically hear the gears turning in her mind, new ideas beginning to form. But the emotional weight didn't completely evaporate. It shaped the uncertainty of their future conversations, where honesty could either fortify their bonds or reveal scars. She realized the next steps wouldn't be easy. Navigating this new space required earnest consideration not just of her ambitions, but of how to support her children in voicing their own aspirations as well. "Maybe we can all start by sharing failures too," she suggested, a tentative smile budding on her lips. "What if we made it a point to embrace when things don't go as expected, to take the plunge, no matter how anxious it makes us?" Their eyes sparkled at the idea, and a spark of excitement brewed anew. As laughter returned to the table, Margaret felt the contours of this familial dynamic shifting. Yet, just as they began to delve into plans for their budding project of shared vulnerability, the clock chimed. A familiar sense of dread washed over her. Tomorrow was the first day of her class, and the reality of it collided brutally with her newfound enthusiasm. Swallowing hard, she braced herself for the boundary that lay ahead with the world outside her comfortable home. How would she navigate the complexities of this newly energized dynamic, coupled with the impulse to retreat into what was familiar? The clock ticked on, and Margaret inhaled sharply. Tomorrow held possibilities, but also challenges that could unravel everything she had started to weave. As they closed the dinner with plans, she knew in her heart that the real work had just begun. Would she be able to embrace what awaited her? Or would the struggles choke the very passion she had reignited? And in that moment, the tension thickened, morphing the warmth of the dinner table into a stage set for the turbulent journey that lay ahead. Margaret's alarm clock blared, slicing through the veil of uncertain dreams. Saturday had arrived, Yet the excitement she felt the night before was tangled with anxiety. She sat up, her heart racing. The echo of last night's conversation replayed in her mind like a dance she could barely keep up with. It was not just a writing class. It was an invitation to confront her fears, transform them into words, and share the journey brazenly with others. As she prepared for the day, her routine felt foreign. Sifting through clothes, each garment reminded her of the identity she had carefully crafted over the years: mother, nurturer, friend. But now, beneath those layers, another self emerged, not yet fully realized, trembling at the prospect of unveiling its reflections. Standing before the mirror, she took a deep breath, anchoring herself. This was not merely about writing, it was about vulnerability and honesty, perhaps the deepest forms of courage. The cold air hit her like a reminder as she stepped outside, shivering slightly. The drive to the community center felt longer than usual, each passing street a reminder of the comfort zone she was leaving behind. Thoughts rushed through her mind. What if the instructor emulated a writer she admired, far too deeply? What if her classmates questioned her eligibility to be a part of the class? Churning self-doubt began to bubble over, a wave threatening to pull her under. She parked the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Margaret closed her eyes, inhaling deliberately, grounding herself in the moment. She was embarking on a personal expedition, transcending beyond the confines of her previous self. Remembering Alex's voice, their collective journey into vulnerability, ignited a flicker of resolve within. With a final deep breath, she stepped out and made her way to the entrance. The atmosphere inside felt charged with potential. Other participants mingled, exchanging nervous laughter and tentative smiles. Margaret forced herself to engage with their energy, introducing herself and nodding in agreement when someone shared their own fears about writing, rejections, judgments, divine uncertainties. A sense of shared experience settled in the air, surrounding her like an embrace, igniting her courage. As the class began, Margaret listened intently, absorbing every piece of advice, feeling both excited and anxious as the instructor outlined the course. She could already see the waters rising, dividing her previous notions of being merely on the sidelines and the bold prospect of becoming an active player in her own narrative. However, the first writing prompt sent a jolt of terror through her. Write about a failure that shaped who you are. This was exactly what she had proposed to her children the night before, yet now it felt daunting. What could she possibly reveal that wouldn't expose her vulnerabilities completely? Hands trembling, she scribbled her thoughts. As words flowed on the page, the act felt cathartic, and yet her heart raced at the thought of sharing any part of it aloud. A small voice inside questioned her ability. What if they laughed? What if her words fell flat? But even amidst doubt, clarity emerged. This was an exploration, a chance to discover strength amid perceived weakness. Moments later, as volunteers shared, she found herself clutching the edges of her chair. A woman spoke about career setbacks, a man about relationships ending. They all experienced the pain of loss, yet illuminated the resilience that stemmed from those very moments. The room filled with a captivating mix of humility and bravery. Margaret felt a rush of warmth. The shared tapestry of human experience encircled her, beckoning her to join. Each story chipped away at her hesitance, reinforcing the idea that failure was not an end, but a beginning, a stepping stone to bravely traverse through the depths of creativity. Next up, we'll be exploring how those failures led us to our ambitions, the instructor announced, leaving Margaret feeling simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. She knew what was next, her turn. It was no longer about examining her parents' feelings or her children's support. It was about her heartfelt exploration of self. As her name echoed through the room, she felt the surging tide of her emotions pulsing through her veins. Would her revelation inspire, or would it simply expose her? No matter the outcome, she recognized the transformative power that had been seated within this primal vulnerability. With her heart racing, the words formed, a bridge between her doubts and her desires. This was her moment, the beginning of something she could hold tightly to, a newfound identity that entwined her passion and purpose. But as she stepped forward to speak, the weight of her uncertainties culminated in a truth more daunting than she had anticipated. Today, I want to talk about the fear that has held me back. Each word could set the stage for a rebirth, but her voice faltered, the shadow of vulnerability rising again. Would she find enough strength to voice the fears that could either shatter her or set her free? The silence before her unraveling loomed heavily, and at that moment, everything hung in the balance. Would she embrace this leap or retreat back into the shadows of silence? The silence was an abyss she was teetering on. Margaret felt the weight of the room pressing down on her, faces turned expectantly toward her, yet she was utterly alone in her struggle. Would those faces reflect understanding, or would they harbor judgment? Every doubt welled up again, clamoring for attention, drowning out the hard-fought courage that had gotten her this far. She took a shaky breath, her mind racing. What kind of revelation could she share that would resonate, yet remain safe? The fear of exposing her vulnerabilities intertwined with a thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in her struggles. The class had shared their vulnerabilities just moments earlier. Could they find solace in her truth as well? Fear, she finally uttered, the word hovering in the air, resonating strangely with both heaviness and release. It felt right, and yet terrifying. Fear has been a shadow following me for years, dictating my decisions, holding me captive within my own life. Feeling the vibrations of her own voice gave her an unexpected jolt, pushing her to continue despite the tremor still lacing her words. Each confession became a stone she lifted from her chest. She spoke of her dreams from childhood, unfulfilled and stifled by a sense of obligation. She recounted how she consistently prioritized others' needs over her own, the way she had built walls around herself until they felt like a second skin. The shadows of her fear reminded her of missed opportunities, of creativity that had been silenced for too long. The revelations flowed more easily now, her words growing stronger as they took flight. She revealed her fear of failure, as well as the fear of success, the daunting thought of standing out, and the pressure that accompanied it. With every confession, she could feel the tight grip of self-doubt start to loosen a fraction. The very act of vulnerability transformed her fear into a revelation, and to her surprise, she realized sharing her truth was liberating. As she concluded her thoughts, Margaret glanced around the room. To her surprise, she was met not with blank stares or disapproval, but with nods of recognition, eyes gleaming with understanding. Her courage seemed to ignite something in others. One by one, the participants shared their own stories, echoing her struggles, some delving into the darkness they had faced. She felt an unexpected wave of kinship wash over her. This was the unity she didn't know she craved, the understanding that flowed through shared experience, blurring the lines between individual and collective. Yet as the adrenaline faded, a new realization began to emerge. Had unveiling her truth simply scratched the surface of her deeper aspirations? With the initial fear receding, a simmering question remained. What did it mean to fully embrace her identity as a storyteller? Unbeknownst to her, the class was a mere backdrop to the deeper journey she needed to embark upon, a quest for authentic self-expression beyond just words on a page. The instructor wrapped up the session, applauding the courage they had shown. Each story is significant, she said, looking directly at Margaret. Writing isn't just an act. It's a process, one that leads to understanding, healing, and ultimately becoming your most authentic self. As the room emptied, Margaret lingered, the thrill of her spontaneous courage coursing through her. This was only the beginning. She felt a burgeoning desire within, to explore not just her fears, but also her dreams, the parts of herself she had neglected for too long. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows that reminded her of the fears she was beginning to shed. She took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, feeling lighter. At that moment, she realized this journey required more than just bravery. It required asking herself piercing questions about who she truly wanted to be. With one foot in front of the other, she turned toward her car, but the impending twilight held her captive, igniting a sense of urgency fueled by newfound ambition. There were stories hungry to be told, not just hers. What awaited her was not merely the act of writing, but the journey into unknown depths, the destination of her own voice that had yet to be unveiled fully. Would she dare to explore these new territories, or would she stay confined within the edges of her comfort? As she drove home, determination surged within. Even if she hadn't uncovered it all, she was moving towards something deeper, a confrontation with unfulfilled ambitions waiting for her to find clarity amidst the chaos. And as she pondered her next steps, a thrilling notion lingered. What if vulnerability was not just a risk, but a route to discovering the true stories that made her who she was? There was no turning back now. The real journey was only just beginning. Margaret's drive home was punctuated by the low hum of the radio, the music melding into her thoughts. Each note pulled her deeper into reflection, unearthing layers of desire buried beneath the weight of fear. A voice inside her whispered that this newfound clarity was only the starting point, an invitation to explore not just her narrative, but the very essence of who she aspired to be. She parked in her driveway, the familiar surroundings suddenly feeling different, as if they held both history and potential. The echoes of shared vulnerability had awakened something in her, a potential waiting for courage to manifest. Stepping into her home, she found it both a comfort and a cage, the four walls enclosing reminders of dreams deferred. The clutter of unfinished projects scattered across the table mirrored the chaos in her mind. Margaret made her way to the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of herbal tea, trying to ground herself. The warmth radiated through the ceramic, yet it was the aroma that sparked a memory, her childhood passion for storytelling, woven with her mother's bedtime tales, tales that shaped her understanding of the world. Why did the years of silence overshadow such vibrant beginnings? As she settled into a chair, she noticed a notebook perched on the edge of the table. Its pages, crammed with half-formed ideas and disjointed paragraphs, beckoned her. She hesitated, fearing that scratchy ink could lead her too deep into introspection, too close to her unfulfilled dreams. Yet, it was that very fear which had pushed her in front of her classmates mere hours ago. Facing her inner voice proved pivotal. Margaret flipped open the notebook, the familiar scent of paper releasing waves of nostalgia. Maybe it was time to rewrite her own script, the one dictated by a life lived for others. She felt the spark ignite within her, eager to breathe life into her stagnant dreams. Grabbing a pen, she began connecting the dots between her aspirations and her daily existence. Words flowed as she scribbled furiously, every sentence a revelation. She conjured up characters shaped by her experiences. A fear-ridden girl who discovered the power of her own voice, an artist chipping away the walls that had imprisoned her creativity. Margaret found sanctuary in this exploration, identifying trends in her narrative, the themes that surged between fears and want, shadows and light. But as excitement bubbled within, a fear creeped back in. What if she didn't measure up? What if the stories that poured onto the page remained trapped in mediocrity as she had for so long? A knot twisted in her stomach. Margaret recalled her instructor's words, "The process is part of the path to authenticity." Confronting this new dilemma only confirmed what she'd learned that day. Vulnerability is not weakness, but rather an inherent strength. She needed to embrace both her trepidation and tenacity in serendipitous harmony. As night draped its cloak over the activities of the day, Margaret slowly put her pen down, wiping the sweat from her brow. She'd come face to face with her fears, but the current felt incompletely resolved, a race without a final lap. Shifting her focus to the stories she wanted to amplify in her life, a question bubbled to the surface. What if authenticity came with confrontation? In that silence, the walls of her home seemed to thrum, each breath she took resonating with potential. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would confront the next layer of her buried ambitions, the stories hidden within. The world outside would not wait. Each moment became a chance for her to craft something alive. Just as she stood, ready to set her aspirations into motion, a light blinked on her smartphone, a message from her instructor requesting a follow-up on their session. Suddenly, the weight of possibility hung between reluctance and resolution, igniting a new thread of the journey she didn't know awaited her. Would this reach-out mark the beginning of another layer of vulnerability, or reveal the complexities of navigating a once-aspiring storyteller's world? The moment left her wondering just how deep she would have to go to flourish in her newfound authenticity. Margaret woke to the soft glow of morning light spilling into her bedroom, illuminating the corners where shadows of doubt had once resided. Today was the day she would put her renewed intentions into action. The transformative night of writing had sparked a fire within her, compelling her to embrace vulnerability as a pathway toward her genuine self. Setting the intention, she made her way to her kitchen, the heart of her home. The scent of brewing coffee enveloped her, instilling a sense of comfort. As she stirred sugar into her cup, she reflected on yesterday's discoveries and how sharing her fears with her writing group had tied her closer to her aspirations. Clarity washed over her. She was no longer just the matriarch consumed by anxiety and reluctance. She was a storyteller, a vessel of narrative waiting to be honed. In the shadows of her mind, the voice of doubt lurked still. What if her writing didn't resonate or lacked depth? Would her next steps push her children away? But this time, she welcomed those doubts with a nod, understanding they were part of the journey. Her empowerment stemmed not from eradicating fear, but from learning to dance amidst it. Margaret poured her heart into her notebook, spiraling beyond the table in her kitchen. As she transcribed her thoughts, an exhilarating idea flared. What if she hosted a family writing night? They could bond over storytelling, creating a shared experience that transcended mere conversations of vulnerability. With a plan forming, she texted Alex and Lily, inviting them to join her for a creative evening filled with laughter, dinner, and storytelling. It felt exhilarating to shift from being passive in their lives to becoming an active creator of meaningful moments. When her children agreed with enthusiasm, Margaret felt a surge of accomplishment and connection, redefining herself not just as a mother, but as a guide, leading her family into uncharted territories of emotion and understanding. Later that evening, the air hummed with warmth. The table was set, adorned with dishes that spoke of shared memories, steaming pasta, garlic bread, and salad sprinkled with family secrets. As her children gathered, Margaret observed their excitement, mingling with tender apprehension. She felt that familiar flutter in her belly, an exciting blend of fear and anticipation. After dinner, as the remnants of their meal lingered, Margaret proposed her exercise. "Let's write stories tonight," she said, her voice steady, yet her heart raced. "Each of us will share something true, something we've never revealed or explored before. We promise support and laughter no matter what." Alex exchanged glances with Lily, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But beneath the surface, Margaret recognized a willingness to embrace this leap together. It was a significant shift. Each child was prepared to step outside their comfort zone alongside her, rather than veering away. As everyone settled with their pens, Margaret felt inspiration course through her, invigorating every word that formed. They began scribbling, the faint sound of ink scratching against paper harmonizing into a comforting melody. In that sacred space, tensions prayed off under the weight of honest expression, their collective intentions preserving the integrity of their fears and aspirations. When they finally convened to share, Margaret's gaze danced between Alex and Lily as they recounted their stories. Alex spoke of insecurities he faced in his passions, while Lily shared her experience of feeling unseen among her peers. Each narrative resonated deeply, weaving a tapestry of vulnerability that only she could inspire. When it was her turn, Margaret took a deep breath. The words she shared were a reflection of the heart she had gradually pieced back together. As she recounted how fear had both defined and confined her, a balm of empowerment settled in the air. Her children listened raptly, nodding in understanding. Their reactions ignited a wave of acknowledgement, laughter buoying the air and weaving through their shared barriers. This was not just a night of storytelling, it was a redefining moment, creating threads of intimacy that would forever bind her family. As the evening came to a close, Margaret realized her children had witnessed her metamorphosis, not simply of a mother enduring the years of aging, but as a woman daring to reclaim her voice. She watched them, illuminated by the warmth of connection, and felt an unshakable pride stir within her. In her journey, Margaret had discovered she could be a source of inspiration and empowerment, both to herself and to her children, with every word she penned. Through the act of storytelling, she not only paved the way for her own growth, but invited her family to flourish alongside her. As they embraced that night, Margaret recognized the depth of what they had achieved together, not merely as each other's confidants, but as co-creators of their destinies. Fear transformed into strength, anxiety shifted into authenticity, and through it all, age revealed not a burden, but a pathway to genuine connection. With an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, she looked forward, knowing the real trials would lie in maintaining this newfound familial bond. The invitation to explore life and its quagmires lay open before her, waiting to be filled with words waiting to be told, stories yearning to be heard. As she began to forge ahead into the unknown, she possessed a newfound resolve. She was not just telling her story, she was living it, and it was only just the beginning. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel and show true fans of overcoming stories the care they deserve.